The town didn't know her name until she walked in and pointed to her own grave. You tell yourself stories to survive the dark. You invent explanations for the sounds a house makes in the dead of night. You classify the unexplainable as a trick of the light, a product of fatigue, a figment of an overactive imagination. These fictions are the bedrock of sanity. Our lives are built on the assumption that the world operates on a set of unbreakable rules. But what happens when you are shown, with irrefutable clarity, that the rules are a lie? What happens when the monster under the bed is real, but it's sleeping in your own daughter's room, wearing her face? Our story didn't begin with a storm or a haunting. It began with sunshine and the smell of freshly cut grass. Our life was a carefully curated collection of normalcies in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac. I was Sarah, a graphic designer who worked from a sunlit home office. My husband, Tom, was an engineer, a man who believed in physics, logic, and the comforting certainty of numbers. He was the anchor, I was the sail. Together, we had built a life that felt safe, predictable, and blessedly mundane. And at the heart of that life was our daughter, Lily. At 5 years old, she was a whirlwind of glitter, questions, and mismatched socks. Her laugh was the soundtrack to our weekends. We built pillow forts in the living room that collapsed under the weight of our own laughter. We had movie nights with too much popcorn. We were happy. Or more accurately, we were happily oblivious. First whispers of the wrongness began so subtly they were easy to dismiss. There was her peculiar aversion to the smell of wood smoke. While neighbors gathered around fire pits on cool autumn evenings, Lily would press her face into my side, her tiny body trembling, whispering that it smells sad. There was her humming. She would hum these strange, discordant melodies while playing alone, tunes that sounded ancient and full of a sorrow a child couldn't possibly comprehend. They were simple, yet they carried the weight of a forgotten history. Then there was Thomas. "Thomas says hello," she'd announce at the dinner table to an empty chair. "Thomas wants to play hide and seek." "Who is Thomas, sweetie?" Tom would ask, his voice patient, the way you speak to a child about their imaginary friend. "My brother," she'd reply every time, with a steadfast certainty that was unnerving. "My other brother." We explained it away, of course. Kids have imaginary friends. It's a sign of a healthy, creative mind, the pediatrician had said. So we accepted Thomas as a phantom member of our family. We asked him how his day was. We set a phantom plate for him at her tea parties. We played along. It was easier than confronting the chilling alternative, that when she spoke to Thomas, she wasn't imagining it. She was remembering. The first crack in our carefully constructed reality appeared on a day drenched in ordinary sunlight. I was sorting through a box of old family photographs, relics from my own past. Lily padded into the room and climbed onto my lap. I showed her a faded black and white photograph of my grandmother, a woman I'd adored, standing as a little girl on the steps of her childhood home. "Look, Lily, this was my grandma, your great-grandma, when she was your age." Lily's finger, sticky with jam from her morning toast, traced the outline of my grandmother's face. A strange stillness came over her. Her playful energy vanished, replaced by a somber gravity that didn't belong on her small face. "Her name was Eleanor," I said softly. Lily shook her head, a small, slow movement. Her voice, when it came, was a whisper that cut through the silence of the room. "No, her name was Alara." The air turned cold. "What did you say, honey?" "Elara," she repeated, her gaze locked on the photograph. "She was my other mommy, before the fire. She gave me a locket with a bird on it." I felt the blood drain from my face. Elara, not Eleanor. The name was a stone dropped into a still pond, and the ripples were spreading through me, cold and terrifying. I had never spoken that name in our house. It wasn't a family name. It came from nowhere. It came from somewhere else. That night, the conversation with Tom was a tense ballet of his skepticism and my burgeoning fear. She misheard you, Sarah. Eleanor Lara. It's a simple mistake for a 5-year-old. He insisted, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He was cleaning his glasses, a nervous habit he had when his logical world was threatened. It wasn't a mistake, Tom, I whispered, the words feeling dangerous as I spoke them. It was the way she said it, the look in her eyes. It was. It was. A memory, not a mistake. He sighed, the sound of a man desperately clinging to reason. We're not going to spiral over this. It was a weird moment, that's all. But it wasn't just a moment. It was an opening. And through it, more memories began to pour. The details became more specific, more vivid, more impossible. She spoke of the other house, constantly now. She described the deep scratch marks on the back of the red front door where a dog named Jasper used to paw at it. She talked about the taste of the well water, cold and metallic. She described her brother, Thomas, in excruciating detail, his unruly brown hair, a small scar above his left eyebrow, the way he could climb the tall oak tree in their yard all the way to the top. The nightmares intensified. They were no longer just childish fears of the dark. They were specific, recurring terrors. I would stand outside her door, my hand on the handle, frozen by the sounds coming from within. She wouldn't scream, not anymore. She would whimper, a low, guttural sound of pure terror. The smoke is thick. I can't see Thomas. The door is hot, Mommy. The red door is hot. My nights became a descent into a private hell, illuminated by the cold blue light of my laptop screen. I typed the names over and over. Elara and Thomas. Jasper the dog. House fire red door. I scoured genealogy websites, historical society forums, and digital newspaper archives until my eyes burned. The internet, a repository of all human knowledge, gave me nothing. It was like they had never existed, which only deepened the terrifying certainty that they had. The visit to my mother's house was what finally broke Tom's wall of denial. We were there for Sunday dinner. While I helped in the kitchen, Lily wandered into my mother's bedroom. We heard a small gasp. My mother and I walked in to find Lily standing before the antique vanity, staring at a small, tarnished silver locket lying in a jewelry dish. "This was mine," Lily said, her voice trembling with a strange mix of joy and grief. She picked it up, her small fingers fumbling with the clasp. Thomas gave it to me. But the little bird fell off. My mother froze. She looked at me, her face pale. What did she say? "It's just a game she plays," I started to say, the lie dying on my lips. "The clasp on this has been broken for 50 years, my mother whispered, her eyes wide with a fear that mirrored my own. "My father gave it to my mother, Eleanor. He told me a piece, a tiny carving of a bird broke when she was a child. No one knows that story. No one." Lily looked up at us, her eyes full of tears. "I miss Thomas." That night, the argument between Tom and me wasn't about whether something was wrong. It was about what we were going to do about it. The final piece of the puzzle came a few days later. Lily sat at the kitchen table with a box of crayons, drawing with an intensity that was frightening. For hours she worked. When she was done, she pushed the paper towards me. It was a map. A crude, childlike drawing, but unmistakably a map. It showed a road, a turn-off, a town with a handful of buildings, and a church with a tall steeple. Behind the church was a field dotted with rectangles. On one of the buildings she had written General Store, and in the top corner, in her large, unsteady letters, she had scrawled one word: Heavenwood. Tom stared at the drawing for a long time, his engineer's mind trying to find a logical flaw, a rational explanation. He found none. The map was our breaking point. It was either a descent into shared madness or the first step toward a terrible truth. I found a town, he said finally, his voice hoarse. It's a real place, or it was, 3 hours from here. Havenwood, West Virginia, barely on the map anymore. We have to go, I said. It wasn't a question. The journey to Havenwood felt like crossing a border into another country, a forgotten land where the rules of our world no longer applied. The bright, crisp autumn day slowly faded as we drove, the sky turning the color of a bruise. The highways gave way to winding back roads, the asphalt cracked and healing over with grass. We passed skeletal farms and rusted-out cars sinking back into the earth. It was a land of ghosts. Lily sat in the back, silent. She wasn't excited or anxious. She was strangely serene, as if she were simply going home. Turn left here, she said suddenly, her small voice cutting through the oppressive silence. The road she indicated was barely a gravel track, all but swallowed by the encroaching forest. A rusted sign riddled with bullet holes confirmed it. Havenwood. The town was a collection of ruins. A gas station with collapsed pumps, a general store with boarded-up windows, a row of houses with sagging roofs. It was a place where time had not just passed, it had died. As we drove slowly down the main street, a few elderly faces peered at us from behind grimy windows, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Stop here," Lily commanded. We were in front of a small, overgrown lane. We got out of the car, and the air hit us cold and thick with the smell of wet leaves and decay. Lily took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong, and pulled us down the lane. And then we saw it. The chimney. A lone column of soot-blackened brick, standing. Sentinel over a collapsed foundation, choked with weeds and saplings. It was the skeleton of a house. Near what would have been the front porch, the gnarled, thorny branches of a dead rose bush clawed at the air. Lily stopped, her eyes fixed on the ruins. "The smoke came out of there," she whispered, a ghostly echo of her nightmares. "It smelled so bad." Tom let out a choked sound, a half-sob, half-gasp. He stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. But Lily wasn't finished. She let go of my hand and began to walk with a steady, determined pace across a field of tall, dead grass, towards the old white church with its leaning steeple. The one from her drawing dot, we followed her into the cemetery. It was a chaotic garden of stone, with graves from the 1800s leaning against each other, like tired old men. The wind sighed through the skeletal branches of the trees. Lily navigated the tilting headstones with an eerie familiarity. Her small feet, sure on the uneven ground dot, she stopped. She stood before a small, simple stone, no bigger than a shoebox, half consumed by the earth and a thick blanket of moss. It was set apart from the others, almost hidden. She knelt in the damp grass and placed her small hand on it, a gesture of profound and heartbreaking tenderness. I knelt beside her, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Tom knelt on her other side. His hands, which could calibrate the most complex machinery, trembled as he scraped away the moss and grime. The light was fading fast, but as he cleared the stone, letters began to appear, faint and warm by a century of sorrow. First, a name. Elara Vance. My breath hitched. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it was a hallucination. Then, the dates. 1928. 1936. And then, the final soul-shattering line, carved beneath her name. Reunited with her beloved brother, Thomas. The world went silent. The wind, the leaves, my own heartbeat, everything stopped. There, in the dying light of a forgotten town, the story became real. The imaginary friend, the nightmares, the map. It was all true. I looked from the name carved in stone to the face of the little girl kneeling beside me. My daughter, my Lily, and I was overwhelmed by a single terrifying question. Who are you? The drive home was a journey through a vacuum. We didn't speak. We couldn't. What was there to say? We had exhumed a ghost, and now it was sitting in our back seat, buckled into a child's safety seat. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I expected to see a different face staring back at me. Our life was irrevocably fractured. The simple joy of our family was gone, replaced by a constant, low-humming anxiety. We watched her, always watching. When she laughed, we wondered if it was Lily's laugh or Ilara's. When she cried, we wondered whose sorrow we were comforting. The humming, when it returned, was no longer just a strange melody. It was a funeral dirge. Love, which had once been so simple, was now a complex and terrifying equation. How do you love a child who might be a vessel for another soul? Is your love for the vessel or for the ghost within? The nightmare stopped. The talk of Thomas and Ilara ceased. It was as if visiting her own grave had finally allowed the lost little girl to rest. Lily became, on the surface, just Lily again. But the echo is always there. It lives in the silences. It surfaces in the most ordinary moments. Just last week, she was sitting on the swing in our backyard, gliding back and forth. The evening was cool, and a neighbor 2 streets over had lit a fire. A faint scent of wood smoke drifted through the air. She stopped swinging and looked up at me, her eyes clear and calm. "You know," she said, her voice a perfect blend of childlike innocence and ancient wisdom, "you don't have to be afraid. Death is just like walking into another room. You just have to find the right door." And in that moment, I knew this would be our life now. A life lived on the edge of a great and terrible mystery. A life shared with the ghost of a little girl. From Havenwood. I love my daughter more than anything in this world. But sometimes, when she looks at me with those old, old eyes, I am gripped by a cold, primal fear, and I have to ask myself the question that will haunt me until the day I die. Who is it that came back, and is she really mine?